here's my larger point. It's about Sammy Woodhouse and Tommy Robinson. And it's about, in the UK, Nigel Farage and GB News. It's about, things in Canada too. It's about Rebel News. It's about past attempts to marginalize the Reform Party as some sort of far-right institution. What it really is an attempt to drive people who have contrary views or even just grievances, to drive them out of the political establishment and the entire system, to make them pariahs, to send them into exile, to keep all the political institutions just for one group and no one else. Even though our system, in its brilliance, contemplates an official role for someone called His Majesty's Loyal Opposition, where we take someone whose job is to be the leading dissident, the leading contrarian, and give him a job and resources and staff and protection. We give him something called question period or question time, as it's called in the UK. We institutionalize opposition. So we don't drive out opponents and dissidents. We embed it in our system. You can see that in our legal system too. We have a prosecutor, but we also have a defense attorney. We have two sides to every story, sometimes more than two sides. My point is, cancel culture is trying to remove the minority from the system. By that I mean political minorities. Although people who disagree with mass immigration are not a minority in any Western country, that's what's even more perverse about it. You can call anti-immigration people extremists if you like, but in fact, those who call for open borders are the extremists, the fringe. Do you see my point? Our system says don't throw out the opponents, don't throw out the dissidents. In fact, put them in parliament, call them the opposition leader. But look at how gleefully the British police are arresting not just rioters. I support arresting rioters. But they're arresting people who tweet about riots. There was a guy who was jailed for gesticulating at a cop. How's that a crime? More than a year in jail. There was a guy who was jailed for saying mean things to a police dog. Did the police dog get offended? There was a guy who was jailed for saying that the riot police cracking down on Indigenous British are no longer British themselves. I'm not saying any of those things are polite. I'm saying they've got more jail time than some actual rapists have. And the reason that prosecutions are such a spectacle is that the establishment is trying to scare ordinary Brits into shutting up. They're trying to cancel about 80% of Indigenous Brits who are skeptical of mass immigration. By the way, where is the opposition leader, speaking of? In the UK, his name is Rishi Sunak. He's the former prime minister. By the way, he completely supports open borders. He expanded immigration. Of course, he's not opposing anything. Just like in Canada, the Conservatives have really never said a word against mass immigration for 15 years. They're afraid. It reminds me of the leaders' debates in Canada in 2021 when all five of the debate leaders agreed with everything the others did, and they kept out the one dissident, Maxime Bernier, just to be safe. Remember this?
We're all in this together.
We've come so far in the fight against COVID, it's time to finish this pandemic for good. So get vaccinated. If you know someone who hasn't, talk to them. For our kids, for our communities, for our economy. It's how we get forward together.
Vaccines are safe and effective for use. Vaccines are the best way for you to protect yourself, your family, and your community. So get vaccinated. Let's fight COVID-19 together.
Pour vous protéger vous-même, pour protéger les plus fragiles d'entre nous, pour protéger l'ensemble de la population, le meilleur moyen connu demeure le vaccin. S'il vous plaît, soyez responsables, soyez solidaires, faites-vous vacciner. Merci.
We all agree getting vaccinated is the way forward. We're all in agreement this is not a partisan issue, so please get vaccinated.
We're united, and it's time to get the shot. Vaccines save lives. They're how we're going to beat COVID, and it's time for everyone to do it. Get the shot.
Get the shot.
Yeah, total unanimity amongst the ruling class, no citizens allowed, not very democratic. But let me show you what that does, what that systemic, repeated, vicious denormalization and demoralization and marginalization of people does. People with a grievance. That's where hate comes from, by the way. I mean, do you think that guy who told the cops that they weren't even British cops anymore, do you think that arresting him and jailing him for saying that has convinced him he's wrong or convinced him that he's right? Has it cured him of his underlying grievance? So let me show you something. It's a poll that a famous UK pollster called YouGov published. This was right after the riots. I referenced this the other day, and I wasn't as precise as I wanted to be, so I'm going to show you some of the actual numbers here. On page 5, here's a question they put to Brits. Thinking about the recent protests and unrest that have taken place, the riots, how much sympathy, if any, do you have with the views of the following? Those taking place in recent protests peacefully. And you can see 58% of people support that. So despite the hurricane of media attacks on the protests, 58% of Brits tell pollsters that they sympathize with the anti-immigration protests. The pollster then asked people if they support those causing unrest, as in rioters. Now, 8% say they do, which is pretty small, but 25% of people who voted for Reform UK voters said they sympathize. I'm going to come back to that and what I think it means. But let me show you on the bottom of page 6 and top of page 7, they ask, do you think the recent protests and unrest that have taken place are justified or unjustified? So it's a little bit different than asking if you personally support it. On the top of page 7, 12% of the general population says the riots are justified. And again, for supporters of Reform UK, that's Nigel Farage's party, that number goes up to 33%. I'll just show you a few more stats. At the bottom of page 7, 16% of all Brits said the rioters were, quote, people were with legitimate concerns. And again, fully 49% of Reform UK voters said that. By the way, on page 9, 69% of Brits say the news media bears responsibility. Isn't that the truth? I'll stop with the numbers. Here's what I'm trying to prove with this poll. Reform UK, that's Nigel Farage's party. He's the man who successfully led the Brexit referendum to get the UK out of the European Union. He's pretty much the only mainstream politician against mass immigration. He got more than 4 million votes, but he only got 5 seats. Came in second in nearly 100 ridings. That obviously doesn't count. So he would be like Maxime Bernier if Bernier got 5 seats. But they're trying to drive Nigel Farage out of Parliament, out of polite company. They're trying to demonize him and cancel him. Literally, his bank debanked him, firing him as a client and smearing him in public simply because of his politics. They're trying to cancel Nigel Farage, even though he gets millions of votes. They're trying to cancel Tommy Robinson, and they pretty much succeeded until Elon Musk brought him back on Twitter. They're canceling any Brits who simply tweet or Facebook their opposition to the way the world is going, and they're even trying to cancel Sammy Woodhouse, the victim of rape gangs. They're literally trying to destroy her, to drive her out, even as a citizen journalist. What if they succeed? What if in the UK they succeed in driving out anyone concerned about mass immigration? Drive them out of politics and the media and the courts, drive them out of polite company. That's what's happening. I can see it. What if they manage to do it, to effectively strip actual British citizens of their citizenship in a meaningful sense, to turn them into non-persons in order to continue with their mass immigration schemes? What if they take away all the normal customs of being a Brit? You can't speak out. You can't run for office. If you can't speak up on GB News, the last conservative TV station in the UK, because the government regulator silences you, if you can't speak up on your own citizen journalism website because the Times comes to destroy you, if you can't vote for Reform UK, if you can't win in court because woke judges and woke laws criminalize patriotic dissent, well, then what happens then? If you are told you do not belong in the system, if you are told you do not count, if the rules are twisted, if there's two-tiered justice, if you no longer believe you can work within the system, what do you have to lose then? That's what I'm worried about. 12% of Brits say the riots were justified. 16% say the rioters have legitimate concerns. That's still a small minority, but it's not nothing. And a big chunk of Reform UK voters say so. If you tell everyone that you hate, that they are not allowed to participate in democracy, they'll finally get the message. And it could be a terrible message. Look, I'm against riots, but Nigel Farage and Tommy Robinson and Sammy Woodhouse did not cause the riots. They're actually the safety valve. They're the preferable solution to riots. They're the only people trying to keep dispossessed working class Indigenous Brits still hopeful, still engaged in the system. You cancel Nigel Farage, you jail Tommy Robinson, well, then why wouldn't their supporters riot? It's the only path you've left for them. And after all, isn't that what the authoritarian left really wants? I think they want that. They want right-wingers to riot. They don't want them in Parliament. All this time, for years, for decades, the left has talked about defunding police and releasing criminals from prisons. But it's only because it was the wrong kind of criminal. They're emptying the prisons in the UK right now of real violent criminals because they can hardly wait to fill the prisons back up with their political opponents. I think the UK is in for trouble. And if we don't change our course, we'll go the same way. Stay with us for more.